Hello, everybody. Welcome to our second talk with Susan Gagnon. Um, Susan, maybe we're going to talk today about the RCM process, but could you tell us a little bit about where you teach and what you've been doing recently and in the past?
Well, I've been teaching with the conservatory since 1984. I also teach with the Oakville Suzuki Association. Um,
And this is all in
and
Toronto area then,
yeah,
right?
I live in Oakville, which is a half an hour drive in good traffic into Toronto, and I'm really not missing the commute though. With all assuming that that's the one perk of this time is that I
Right.
can just stay home. Um, but yeah, so I've been an examiner for the conservatory since 1995. I've been a cello trainer since 2000, 2001. I can't remember exactly. I should try and figure out the exact date, but um, and I do think of myself as a Suzuki teacher at the core, and I am a Suzuki teacher at the core. But I teach the Suzuki method at the conservatory, as well as, of course, I did do the last three cello syllabi and compiled the 2013 materials. I did the 1995 and the 2007, and then finally 2013 we got books, which is wonderful.
Yes,
Uh,
that's so great. Was that a whole committee of people then, those the book compiling and the syllabi?
Actually, I had one person working with me um, on the books like prep through eight, and really on all of that material, and then another person on the upper end and the orchestral excerpts. But I did was the one through it all. So um, yeah, so I think I actually did the most work. But anyway,
Wow,
um, yeah, it was a lot.
that's that's incredible. There's so much in there. I can't believe it was two of you doing it.
Yeah, yeah.
That's
Well, what
shocking.
I mean, I mean, we just compiled it and edited. The one thing that I mean, well, you can ask your questions, but one thing that I really love about the early grade books is that they had a whole like they had a whole slew of composers that were arranging. So like I'd find some in some ancient book, the Soundpost. I don't know if you know that store. It's a great store in
Yeah.
Toronto, and they sort of service the Suzuki world in all of Canada, and they're very good at finding stuff. Like they go to England all the time, and so we had a lot of the British stuff, and so I'd spend go through everything they had, and so I'd find these tunes in old books that you couldn't get anymore anyway, and so they'd give I thought, oh, this would be great for this level or whatever, and so they'd give them to these composers, and they made wonderful arrangements of some of these
Oh,
books.
I see. So you commissioned these arrangements.
Right, the conservatory had a like the exam department had a whole fleet, because they were actually in 2013 they got the only reason we got books, right? We're not a big area of, the pianos have always had books, and violin and voice. But other than that, nobody had actual books. So you'd always have to, and kids always had to bring in originals. It was a bit of a pain to have, because you'd have to have all these different books, rather than be able to go to basically one source. Um, yeah, so in 2013 they had a big grant, and they did books for like all of the instruments except double bass. So they didn't, but yeah, but like clarinet, and I mean, and flute and all these. So yeah, so we were very grateful that that was able to happen. They're currently actually revising the violin series again. I heard through the grapevine they haven't asked me yet about doing anything, and I think everything's on hold with COVID. But I've heard that they're not actually going to redo our books. That hopefully we'll be able to do some of the get rid of some of the typos that are still there, unfortunately.
Oh, you probably only see the typos when you, that's the problem of
Well,
creating
it was
these
a
books.
very quick process. It was, we had, for the proofreading, we had 2 weeks and it would go back and forth, but the proofreaders were dealing with all sorts of stuff. And so they often didn't actually do what we said. So like one that really bugs me is I don't know if you've looked at the books very well, but in level 8, the Mendelssohn Song Without Words, the slurs are halfway in the air. The ones that we, and everybody knows the way it should go. So hopefully everyone fills in the rest of the slurs. But anyway, so
Right.
there are some interesting issues. But yeah, so I guess I was supposed to be telling you about myself. Have I done? I also I played professionally with the Hamilton Philharmonic until this last year, and yeah, I have a lot of students.
How many students do you have?
Oh, I don't know, somewhere I haven't counted recently, but somewhere in the mid 50s.
Oh my gosh, you have a lot of students.
I have a lot of
Do you
students.
teach 7 days a week? You don't teach 7 days a week, do you?
But I do have, I can see in Ontario, it's legal for students to miss up to half a day of school for music lessons. So
Oh, really?
yeah, they can't be counted as late or missing.
What?
Yeah,
Wait,
yeah.
that's
So
in all of Canada, or is that an Ontario thing, or Toronto?
Ontario especially, but I think there are similar things in all of Canada.
Oh,
So
it's so different than here.
the kids actually get high school credits for levels 7 and 8 and when they have the theory that goes with it, especially. But yeah, yeah,
That's so amazing. That's so
yeah.
great.
So you
So,
can
I
pretty much.
guess maybe could you tell us a little bit about the process of the testing? You know, when what the preparation that goes into it and what you do in the actual testing.
Sure. So what I was going to say in terms of how I do it with my students, um, what I find myself doing, see, especially with it's interesting because I have two groups of students. I have my Toronto students and I have my Oakville students. And the Toronto students are given a free exam a year, and they're studying at the mothership, right? They're also given all of the materials for free.
What?
Not paid
That's
for free,
huge.
right? I'm sure it's rolled into their fees. But yeah, so they really are encouraging us to have everybody do the exams at the conservatory.
So these
And
are all yours, like your cello studio students are encouraged to do all the tests. So anyone that takes lessons are just encouraged to do the testing, basically.
even if they're Suzuki students, they're still encouraged to do the
Got it.
RCM tests. In Oakville, it's more of a choice. So I have fewer of the little guys doing the exams in Oakville, although I do I still try and encourage it. I mean, what I do with my kids that do the exams is I usually end up like usually we do a June exam. Oh, in the fall, I really work their review, their Suzuki review. Maybe start their scales depending on what grade they're on. They're in. From grade 5, the scales are challenging. So from grade 5 up, if they're at that level, but then I start working their scales in the fall. But we don't start thinking about the exams until the new year, right? I basically try and make them Suzuki strong in the fall, right? Do all of their review, um, and and then um, and then I let them, they get their books. I let them listen to because I do strongly believe in starting by ear, and that's one of the reasons that I've actually enjoyed having my kids do. Until this point, sight reading has only started at level 3. I think with the new set of syllabi, it's going to start at the beginning, but from what I hear, but
Oh,
it will
so
be
the level
first,
one will have sight reading in the future?
but it'll be super, super easy. So just getting them going on it. Which as long as it's super, super easy, I'm fine with it because I do delay the reading. And, but because there are recordings that go along with the books, they can be basically Suzuki is a philosophy, as we know. It's not just the music, right? It's how we approach it, how we work with the families, with the parents. And
Oh, I actually didn't realize that there were recordings. I didn't know
yeah,
that.
so the actual repertoire books are on the expensive side, but they, you know, they had to pay for all these composers to make arrangements. They had to, if not, they had to pay for copyrights, and they had to pay for the recording, and they had to pay everyone that was doing all the compiling and editing, of course,
Wow.
all of
Wow.
that. So, I mean, it was an expensive process,
Yeah.
which is why we never had them before 2013. But anyway, so it's gonna take me a while to get to the actual exam process, exam thing. But anyway, I wanted to talk about just what what the lists are and what kind of repertoire they cover first, maybe. And so I let them choose, which is kind of fun. Then, you know, I do my Christmas January. So I've been doing them in January lately, but solo recitals are usually all Suzuki material, or mostly. And then the June is mostly RCM material. And it's fun because they all have, like, there is some duplication. So, you know, some of the pieces are more attractive than others, but there's usually quite a variety of repertoire on the June recitals. And maybe later, and I can even show you a little recital clip or two of some of the junior stuff, some of these arrangements. But anyway, so in lists, like at the preparatory level 1 and level 2, you just play 2 pieces. And the pieces are like the list A is slower, smoother repertoire, and list B is more energetic, quicker pieces. And then from level 3, 4, and 5, in level 3, 4, and 5, there are 3 pieces. List A are classical or Baroque. List B is romantic or folk. And list C is post 1930, which, you know, really, I think
That's
really
so
fills,
exciting.
yeah, exactly,
Just to
fills
have
the gap
that.
of repertoire that, yeah, that the kids are not otherwise getting, right?
Right.
There's, you know, basically the Voracek's the first, I think the Humoresque is our first romantic piece. There's not much, right? And there's no modern. So anyway, so there's so that's fun. And then from in level 6 and 7, there are also 3 pieces, but list A for cello is sonata or concerto. For violin, it's concerto, and then list B is their sonata, and list C is their concert piece. For us, there just aren't enough concertos, so we put the sonatas and concertos are list A. List B is concert repertoire, and list C is unaccompanied. So it's a very small list, but like in level 6, book 4 Suzuki is basically level 6. So it's you know, the minuets and the jig from the G major suite.
And
Are,
there are 8 levels total. Is that right? Am I remembering right?
no, that's the British system.
Oh, that's
There are 10 and an ARCT. So it's actually, yeah, and the ARCT is supposed to be sort of the equivalent of a bachelor's degree kind of level. Yeah. But, and I think actually on cello, it's, if anything, harder than on piano for sure. But anyway, from what I understand. And I don't know about violin maybe, but anyway. So yeah, we have to work a little harder. And then from level 8 and up, there are 4 pieces, like, so at list A, B, C, and D. And list A is concerto, list B is sonata, list C is concert piece, like accompanied, and list D is unaccompanied Bach, or unaccompanied. It could be Motz, it could be modern, but just unaccompanied. so, and from level 7, we like from prep through level 6, there are 2 etudes um, required. From level 7 and up, it's only 1 etude. But in level 7, we introduce orchestral excerpts. And then from level 8 and up, there are 2 orchestral excerpts, but in level 7, only 1.
So what level is it orchestral excerpts? It's level 8, is that what you said?
Level 7 is
Seven.
there's 1 orchestral excerpt
I
required.
see.
And then from level 8, there are 2.
I see. Okay. Great.
And then there's, of course, there's all the scales, and then there's sight reading and ear training. And there's not really enough support for cello for those things yet, I will say. So you have to get creative. And my husband has actually written sight reading material to support the strings that he sells through his
That
house.
sight reading material, that stuff is so great. This such a service, what he did,
Yeah,
really.
yeah. So he's been adding to that too. But yeah, because it's, I mean, there's the sight reading materials from England are great too, but they weren't really kind of oriented towards what our needs were. A little different. In England, it was more difficult keys, and here it was more difficult rhythms, or so the stress was slightly different. So he kind of, yeah, he had fun doing a lot of composing. But anyway, and then the ear stuff as well. I gather with the next round of syllabi, we're going to be going more towards the piano, what the pianos have done in their last syllabus, which means we're going to actually have to work a little harder for the ear at the upper end. I think because they are going to make us do things like chord progression. I don't know. I have yet to see what that's all about. Identification, which for,
Oh,
for
that is
string
so
players.
complicated for string players. At least we have an
Oh,
advantage being a bass instrument, but still.
yeah. So, I mean, at this point, we've just had to do cadence identification, and it's the hardest, I mean, in terms of chord identification. But so they, in the beginning, it's just like the prep in level 1, they just have to do a clapback and a playback. And I find it interesting that the kids that are the young kids, who learn by ear, Suzuki method, no problem with the playback. The clapback is all focus. If they're so adults who cannot do the playbacks can do the clapbacks easily. But the kids struggle a little with the clapbacks. So you have to
That's
train them to close
fascinating.
their eyes and just try and memorize it, not to think too much, and then sing it back to themselves and clap along. And usually they can do it, but it depends how focused they are. So that can be a little challenging. But and then from level 2, they start with just identifying major thirds and perfect fifths. And so there are intervals from then up, interval identification. And the clapbacks stop at level 7. They're pretty long at that point and difficult, actually. But it's good for the kids, to have to, like, if they really, I've had many students over, like I remember one student who's a composer now in England, but he got 5 out of 10 on his ear in level 9 because he didn't practice it. And then, so he finally, then when he did his level 10, he got 10 out of 10 because he practiced it. It's not that he couldn't do it, but it does take, and not all teachers really get organized about how to help support their students. There are ear training programs now offered by the conservatory on their website, but they're currently, like, they're really piano oriented. They're unfortunately, I tried to tell them that they need to have a thing where you click what instrument you're doing it with, and then it would at least transpose the keys. I mean, that you would think that wouldn't be so difficult. I mean, I think it's good for them. I can't. Are you muted?
Yeah.
Right. Oh, there. Okay, that's fine. Anyway, so so you have to work at it a bit. There was a series of materials that they no longer, unfortunately, print comprehensive ear. Anyway, we've got, so if ever you're doing this, I could send you all kinds of stuff that we've put together that are, you know, just audible, like on tracks, MP3
So
files.
these are, you mean like for practicing that kind of
Yeah, for
thing?
practicing clapbacks and playbacks and interval identification, chord identification, cadence identification, all of that stuff. Um,
Yes, daughter.
awesome.
Chicken 뭐야?
미라팡.
비룡.
Okay.
Okay. How old are you now? Sorry, I've forgotten her name.
Her name, what is your name?
Was that?
This is Miss
Elizabeth.
Susan. Miss Susan. She's a cello teacher. She's seen you before. 이따가 치우기 이따가 하도 돼요.
Abracadabra.
Abracadabra. Okay, I have to talk now, so we have to go upstairs. 올라가야 해요. 아빠 불러야 해.
아니.
오케이, 그러면 올라가세요. Okay, thank you.
So where were we? So haven't got around to the actual. So you asked what the actual exams are like, or so I've been doing Zoom exams, you know, since.
Yeah, so they I didn't realize you had gone online with the exams. That's incredible. I guess it's possible, right? Do you find
Yeah.
it's
And mostly it's been fine. You know, there have been a few kinks with that, but like I did a really lovely exam from Edmonton, but I could hardly hear him. But I mean, what I could hear was beautiful violin player, but it was such a bad connection. So anyway, he was in a church, and then he switched to a data phone, and it was a little better. But anyway, for you know, people have to have, like I haven't had any trouble teaching on Zoom because I have you know, wealthy families that I'm working with, which, you know, I feel slightly guilty that I'm not servicing all communities.
right? There's that
But
too. Yeah.
but they all have, you know, good Wi-Fi. Mostly they've got mics. You know, they've got decent equipment, and I find that it's actually the device that they're on that makes the most difference. But anyway, so when you're examining, you know, you might have people that have never Zoomed before, even so, but you can still tell quite a bit, enough, I think, to do an accurate assessment. And mostly it's been fine. So in the exam, the students just are supposed to fill in a program with their repertoire and everything, and they fill it in the order that they want to perform it. So they could start with their repertoire, or they could start with their scales, and they always do the ear and then the sight at the end. And they're supposed to be accompanied for anything that requires accompaniment with the
Oh, so they hire a pianist to come in and play with them, but you don't provide one at the school, do you?
no,
Oh,
that,
I
that
see.
they have to pay for that. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, so it makes the process more expensive, but on the other hand, I mean, that's just the way it is for us, right? As cellists, we have to hire accompanists. So during COVID time, during June, students were allowed to play unaccompanied up to level 4. And then in the August set of exams was supposed to be live, but it ended up being still Zoom. But they had to, from level 5 and up, they had to have an accompanist. So I, you know, was examining a lot of people that were wearing masks, performing, but at least in Canada, our levels are nowhere near like what you guys are. So it's not quite as, but I mean, in the States, they had to as well.
Well, it's so interesting because then you have clarinet players and things like that too, and
Well, I think with the winds, they decided to forego the accompanist. Yeah, winds and singers actually, but for strings. they stuck to the requirement that they had to. Now, they did say that people could apply for the ability to not have an accompanist. So like if there was a health issue and whatever, or, they couldn't find an accompanist, I'm sure that they fairly easily rolled over. But I actually didn't examine anyone without an accompanist from level 5 up in August.
Oh, that's really speaks. That's cool, actually.
Yeah, but I think a lot of people did also postpone their exams even further. I think exams are still happening, actually. And like it was supposed to be, the Canadian set was supposed to be the 10th to the 22nd. And anyway, I'm on vacation now.
It's so great. It looks so nice. Your background looks like a cabin in the woods.
Well, it sort of is. I don't know. I could show you, but like it will be, I don't know how well you'll see it.
Where are you, by the way?
Lake Muskoka.
Oh my gosh, that's your view. You're right on the water.
Yeah.
Is it a swimmable lake?
Oh, yes.
Oh, I just bought a folding kayak paddleboard combo.
Oh,
So I'm not buying much these days, but I decided I'm
are
gonna
you
do that.
underwater?
Yeah, we have a lot of water that we can drive to here, but nothing as close as that. That's
Yeah,
awesome.
yeah, yeah. I'd get up here before diving back into those 50-some students.
Yeah, right?
Yeah. Anyway, so what else can I tell you about the actual exam room? Um, so they go through, they perform their pieces. Normally, like in a live exam, they're supposed to, only the accompanist goes in with them for their repertoire and only for their repertoire, and then they leave. So it's usually just the examiner and then the student. But of course, this time around, they were, they had to be fine with letting a parent be there and supervising that the Zoom was working and all that and helping. So it's less, but I think actually it's probably a good thing for the parents to actually see the process of the exam.
I was curious as I have so many questions for you. I guess the first one I have is just on kind of a little bit on the history, because we all get RCM and ABSRM mixed up, just like it happens all over the world. But did the RCM, I mean, ABSRM came first, and then was RCM made with that in mind, with that kind of testing in mind, but made to be a little bit more Canada centric then?
Yeah, I mean, I think I don't know the whole history of how long there have been exams, but I think a long time. Like
Oh,
it's,
okay.
yeah, like 150 years probably or something. Yeah, like it's,
Oh, so this has been around a long time. I see. So it's basically it's just separate. It's not like a sister identity.
I think it's spawned from the same idea, right? But it's yeah, ours, I mean, it's quite different in that they only have 8 grades and we have up to level 10 and then ARCT with a prep actually as well. And I want to talk a little bit about the levels in a minute, but in terms of the difference with ABRSM, they redo the syllabus and they kind of, it's a smaller selection to choose from, especially on cello. Some of my, there's my mom, yeah, some of my,
Hi, Mom.
um, yes, yeah. I lost my train of thought. Okay. We were talking about the 8 levels. Oh yeah, our syllabus is really thick, the cello syllabus. And
Yes.
I've had some violin and viola examiners complain about how thick ours is, but it was, I mean, basically the philosophy that I was told when I started redoing the syllabi was to try and make it all inclusive so that everybody would find something that they would, as cello teachers, that they were already doing that they could use to try and encourage more cello participation in the exams.
Yeah, the syllabus it's impressive. It's just amazing.
So anyway, yeah, it's huge, and um, so to revise it's going to be huge too. But anyway, hopefully not too much change will have to happen this time around because they're keeping the books. But anyway, what I wanted to say in terms of just talking a little bit about the books themselves, I think in piano, a lot of Canadian piano teachers just use the books, the RCM books, and they probably have them play everything that's in every book, and um, I suppose you could do that on cello too, but I'm not, as a pedagogue, I'm not pleased with the fact that they wouldn't let me organize the book in easy to hard. They didn't want to have to deal with that in any way. They wanted just to have, and they put all the pieces that are in list A together and all the pieces in list B together. That I understand, but even within those lists, I would have liked to be able to put some order to them, because
Yeah, that would be helpful for
they're all
us.
one grade, but they're not all really, like there's a hard and an easy and a
Maybe you
middle
could
and a
put
low.
together an underground list for those of us, because I look at that list kind of, I get a little intimidated. But I
Well,
don't have the books. I just have the list. I need to just get the books, basically.
yeah, you need to get the books and see. And as I said, basically, well, some of my colleagues, and I'm not as strict about this, but I think it's actually a good approach. Don't have students try an exam until they can do the scales for that level, because the scales really are probably the hardest part of you know what I mean. So if they're doing pieces that then there are Suzuki pieces in, I think, every grade, might be not grade 4, right? But anyway, almost every grade, and all of the Suzuki repertoire is in the syllabus, so you can use those. But I do actually like my students to have supplements. Like I want them to learn some non-Suzuki stuff so that they have more styles and more modern repertoire, and they're fun. They're fun, those
Yeah,
pieces, you
yeah.
know. So so if they're already technically at a level where they could do the exam, then any of the pieces should be fine, really, at that level. Some will be more challenging than others, though,
Okay.
and you'll have to work harder at. And as I said, it's because they wouldn't let me order it. So it's not really like, you couldn't just, I think you couldn't just start at the beginning and go to the end and then do the next, and then without preparing everything along the way like we do in Suzuki. But basically, I think of, and I have had some families just want to go to the, like, push me for the level they're on, which I don't like, but I've caved into sometimes and always regretted. But because I think they have to have done the Suzuki work, really, in my opinion, to then easily, like, and even with the Suzuki or the RCM, I'm supplementing with all kinds of technical exercises too, right? And like Tanya Carey's there's Carl Schroeder, which is not an etude that they would do on the exam, but is an exercise, I think of, right? So there's so whatever we do, we have to work on the abilities to be able to do it. But so I should tell you how the RCM relates to the Suzuki levels. And
Please.
yeah, so the preparatory, I did have students that started less than a year ago do prep exams this time around, which is the first time that I've, like, little guys that I've done. And I'll show you some video in a minute, or later. And so they were, even early book 1 can do prep if
Oh,
if you
that's great.
dare it, if you
I
dare it.
didn't. Yeah,
And
that makes sense, actually.
yeah, and then level 1 is I would say late book 1, And level 2, there's actually not that much difference between prep and 1, but there actually is a fair step up to level 2 because it's kind of like book 2 in that it's got second position and forward extensions. And and that's actually in level 1 there's some backward extensions, but that's it, right? In prep it's all D major, G major, C major. There are some second fingers in prep, but so there's kind of a big step up between 1 and 2, I would say. But so I would, middle of book 2 is preferable for at least for level 2. Level 3, end of book 2, early book 3. You can do level 3, 4 is pretty close actually.
And actually, just looking at the syllabus would probably make
Yeah.
that really clear what everything is,
Well,
right?
I find the Suzuki pieces actually are always the easiest on the list, but
I
it's
see.
because traditionally when I started redoing the syllabi in 95, I had to assume people were playing the Suzuki pieces or any of the other pieces, without shifting necessarily because they weren't edited. So
Right.
then in the teacher that was working with me, we both kind of like to shift. So you can change fingerings
Oh,
and
okay.
bowings if you need to. You don't have to do exactly what's there. Having
Oh,
said that, if you take out all of the second position in level 2, I think you might get marked down because it's to avoid the open A's and all that. But you can certainly I change fingerings and bowings still. So it's certainly you can do that in the books, but and then level 4 is mid book 3, well, even early book 3 and mid, because it's level 5 is the harder book 3, and level 6 is book 4. Suzuki is all of the repertoire in book 4 is in level 6, and then level 7 is book 5, 6, and anyway, it goes up from there.
okay.
But yeah.
I was wondering, you have this studio of students and especially the ones that aren't taking the testing. What do you see as the difference with in your experience of the students who are going through this? This is a pretty rigorous process.
It is. It is. And what I find, especially in Oakville, um, the students that they do eventually want to do exams. So, I still do a lot of etudes and scales with them. And sometimes they do an exam and then they skip a few. Like they just don't do as many exams. But and then at the beginning levels, there's not a huge difference really, I think, between my students that don't do, but the ones that that really work hard on their exams, and I think they do end up being more stronger and I think proud of their accomplishment. Like if they get a nice high mark, which often they do in the lower grades, it gets the marking gets harder.
So when you said that some of the kids skip levels or something, is there a reason to go to do every level? Is there any?
Um, well, I think it makes you stronger yet, but sometimes I choose between 3 and 4, and because I don't have them do like an exam at Christmas usually and June. It depends on the family. If they really want to, I would. But and sometimes they skip, like 7 and 8 are fairly close. They're both big exams, but you could you could go straight from 6 to 8, especially over a year if you've got a hardworking. Actually, the level 8 really is a big exam. You need to really be starting it probably like using a whole year. and you can still do all the Suzuki pieces that you're not going to be putting on the exam. But
Oh, so between level 7 and 8, you're saying there could be a year passing of preparatory work.
yeah, or they, I mean, as I said, I have had a number of students opt out of level 7, especially because it's also a lot of work, but it's not really technically that much different from 8. But so if they want to like fast track a bit.
I was the when you do all these testing, I don't know, like as the piano testing is very widely known among college, not just music schools, but let's say I were to apply to a college, some college, not as a music student, would those so the some of the kids taking these tests want to have something saying that I was a cello student, but I did this much work. Look at
Yes,
is
I
it
have helped students, especially applying for Ivy League schools.
right. Those Ivy Leagues know RCM levels.
Yes, and they like them. Yes.
Okay, because there's no way to quantify. I was a horrible student and never practiced, but took lessons for 10 years,
Right.
and I reached RCM level 10, which is a huge accomplishment, right? I
Yes.
mean, that's a real
Yeah.
sign of some dedication and work and
Right.
yeah,
Right.
it's
Absolutely.
okay. So they do know.
And we
Um,
should talk a little bit about the theory. I was just thinking in terms
oh,
of,
right, yeah, that's right. We haven't talked about that.
yeah, the first theory that is required for you to get the actual wall certificate saying that you've got that grade is level 5. And they've, I guess now they're just calling it theory 5. It used to be like preparatory theory. And then level 6 was 1. And anyway, it's all changed. But basically at level 5, you're supposed to have the theory that goes with it in order to get your certificate. And from there on, you're supposed to have now I do not teach the theory at all because I don't have time.
Oh, so that's how you do. That was one of my questions. How do you fit this all into a lesson? You outsource your theory.
Yeah, well, at the conservatory, of course, there are theory classes, but there is also now they've got online theory courses now on the RCM website that are really very good.
Oh,
And
that's so exciting. I didn't know
yeah,
that at
yeah,
all. Yes,
and
I'm
you
learning so much.
like if you pay for the course, it includes an online exam when you're ready for it.
Oh, that is what an incredible
You don't
resource.
have
And
to
now with
pay.
everyone, no one's allergic to the internet anymore, so it's like maybe people will start taking it.
Yeah.
It's great.
Yeah, so they have, I mean, I think they're adding as they go. Um, I know they've got all the actual theory rudiments is up to level 8 is just what we call rudiments. And then from level 9, it's split into harmony and history. And then level 10, I think, is harmony, history, and see, I don't even know. I should know. They have to have all their
So
theory in level 10
history,
before they can do
history.
AR. Yeah,
Oh,
there's
that's
history,
great.
music history. So the music history courses are online now as well. And I think there's the introductory harmony is also online, but I actually should look into that. But I do know at least one Suzuki teacher who also teaches her own students theory. And who's
Who's
also,
that?
that's Wendy Saravalli Smith.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, I know her name from online stuff. So.
Yeah, yeah. She's active on Facebook. Um,
So, how do you organize your lessons? I feel like with what I do with my students, I've gotten really efficient and I can hardly fit in what I want to fit in. So, but you're putting in, and I am teaching theory and things like that too in my lessons. So I feel like maybe that would be my question for you would be like you're doing the ear training and the clapbacks and the
well, and that I don't do the ear in the lesson until towards the exam myself, but I give them material to work with on their own.
oh, so if they get motivated, they do it on their own.
Yeah, well, no, I tell them to do it on their own.
I see. Oh, I see. Okay. And you're in a culture of this testing, right? So they can talk to each other, and parents do you think they talk to each other about the prep work that gets involved with it?
Maybe. probably.
So if you are not teaching, in your mind when you're preparing a student for a test, in any given year, how much do you feel like you really are focusing on test material in the course of a year or in the course of a single lesson
Um, you mean versus Suzuki material or
versus just anything that wouldn't be aimed for that test? If you're, let's say they need to learn a couple scales, you just make sure that the scales they're learning are for the test, and then the pieces they're learning are applicable for the test, right? And then outside of that, you've
well, I don't necessarily, because I don't want them to get really sick of the pieces because they have to really polish them towards the end. So I don't have generally, I mean, when we get into the higher levels, of course, the concertos and stuff need a lot of time. But at the lower levels, as I said, I don't really start their repertoire until the new year for sure. And even then, maybe a couple months in, depends on the student. Depends
oh,
on,
I see. And then when the test happens, the grading system for the repertoire, could you describe that a little bit?
um, in respect to, it's tough. Like they have to be something special to be in the 90s.
Oh, so it's
It,
out of 100.
yeah, well, I mean, each piece is out of a lot less. The total exam is out of 100, but we go by percent in our mind as examiners for each piece. For in the 80s, it has to be basically all there, but and somewhat musical already, obviously, and you go down from there. In the 70s, there might be some technical issues. In the 60s, there are more, and we certainly hear that as
So
examiners.
then a passing grade to the next level would be what?
60. So, but you hope that your students are in the 80s plus. But I certainly have always the odd student in the 70s. But even though I've been doing this for many, many years, and it's not, it depends on the student.
Let's say that I start, there is an examiner I know that's nearby, but if there's someone who's in an area where there's not an examiner nearby, what happens then?
Oh, when it's not COVID time, we travel.
Oh, so you would hire an examiner to come in.
Their RCM would send the examiners out, like so the American times are in May and December and early August.
Oh, so
Ours are
you
always
so
after.
you get busy traveling around then.
Well, I actually have not done any of the American sets of exams because there haven't been so many strings. Like I do examine all strings, not just cello. But they're always at times when I'm really busy. So I haven't, and it takes usually a day to travel, and then you might examine for a day or two, and then a day to travel back, and you're losing, you don't get paid.
And I mean those months are really busy months. And August is when everyone wants to just go dormant. So
Yeah, so, but in Canada, it's January, June, and later August. So there I usually was traveling, but this time around on Zoom, it's kind of fun because, well, until August, when the main examining time for Canada, basically I was just doing cello exams, and I
that's so
examined,
nice, right?
which is so nice, and I examined people from Shanghai to Yellowknife and all across Canada, and
Oh, even Yellowknife,
a
that's
lot.
really powerful.
Yeah. So I was, I did a lot of Americans too. So I think it's catching on in the States.
Yeah, thank you. She's just telling me.
자기도 오리오 줬어.
오케이, 고맙습니다. 그래, 가. 안녕.
안녕.
My dog trainer just came to pick up my dog, and she's been giving Oreos to the mail people, the UPS truck, the Amazon. So she just gave an Oreo to the dog trainer, and so she's really pleased with herself.
That's fun.
So, so my, I guess the final question I have for you, and I would imagine people who are watching might have some questions for you too, but the final question I have for you is, I've been, well, one of my comments just is I'm really into linguistics these days, and I've been chatting with some, it's been really fun chatting with these linguists about the future of music education and the status of the state of music education these days. And one of the things I'm really interested in these days is also the child on child play based learning where the adult is not present, and the power that it's so much of what we do in Suzuki of group lessons and that power of the group lesson, but really exploring how much the teacher really does need to be present. And one of the things that one of the linguists I talked to said is he talks about comprehensible input, where we just need to surround them, which is of all the things we do in Suzuki with listening. So surround them with input that makes sense to them and give them that input and keep on. The more input they get, and if they're trying to speak, language wise, then they learn. There's no need to learn the grammar. There's no need to learn the vocabulary. That will happen. And it can be, and this particular researcher says, it could be junk reading. It could be, for an adult, John Grisham was the example. And for a child, well, I gave my child, she reads The Butt Detective in Korean. I just but this kind of junk reading actually is still very powerful because it's exposure and it's more that comprehensible input. And in that sense, then, when I think about it that way, sometimes I wonder about the increase of the way schools are structured, in that we send kids to school and they're not really learning from the teacher is the guru there, and generally classes are set up that way. There's some teachers that think outside the box, of course, and we get students to learn from each other, but I'd say predominantly we have a lecture format, and thus testing, because since it's not parallel, the teacher is not parallel with the students, we have to test to see if the students are comprehending what we're trying to relay to them. And I wonder what your thoughts are on this testing that, we sometimes teach to the test to get there. And, I know that inherent, of course, I want to do this so that I see inherent benefits in this, but I wonder if you have, because you've so much experience, if you've seen any of the downsides of the students just getting the tiger parents or the students who aren't in it for the learning but are in it for their certificate. And I wonder how you address
Well,
that.
that's like I have this one family of the 40 that I was going to have to do exams in June. But anyway, who really, I would describe them like what you're saying, who want to do just the tests and weren't willing to, because she's not a quick study. And she was basically well ahead of where I would have her do the exams in terms of the Suzuki repertoire and all of the other skill building stuff. It's at a certain point you cannot play the pieces well on the exam without the technique, without a beautiful vibrato, without smooth bow changes, without bow control. All these things that make them a musician. Basically, you can't just teach to the test. You can use it as, a goal. And I have found that if students, if you've got a student who's flagging and you think that a goal like this might help them, I would say not, unless you do it with a really easy grade for them, because they're not going to suddenly, most kids unfortunately are not going to suddenly change their habits of practice just because they have an exam coming, and then it's going to be stressful all around. But so I think that it's important that we teach what our students need to become, the best cellists they can be, and to feel good about themselves as as people and as cellists, and develop the whole human being like we. And then use the test as a for it does make them more well-rounded with all the sight reading and the scales and the ear training and the etudes. I am really pleased with the etude books, by the way. They're all my favorite etudes from and then they don't have to buy 10 etude books. I still usually make them buy Rick Mooney's position pieces, because even though there's some in there, I did put some of his pieces in the books. I think that's essential stuff.
So I guess I do have one more question for you. What would you say is your goal for your students, given the Suzuki teaching, the RCM testing? When you feel like you have a student that's, where do you want? I don't even know how to phrase my question. Where are they headed in your opinion? Where should they be headed, or are you letting them lead the way, or how do you view that?
Well, I think, like all good teachers, we want them to be able to play the concertos and perform well, hopefully. But every student is different. If there's some students, I wouldn't say that. And partly they lead the way, because I don't, I don't say you have to practice 3 hours a day in my studio. So the amount that they're ready to commit is part of the whole thing. And I've had many students over the years become professional cellists, but I don't think that should be the goal of all of my students. My goal really for them is to love music and be able to continue playing it, and take their cello to university with them. Like any good Suzuki teacher.
Right? Wouldn't that be great for them to have it in the corner and pull it out every once in a while, right?
Play with the orchestra that's maybe a non-music orchestra, or maybe it depends on the school, right?
Right. You mentioned some videos. Do you have videos to show us?
A couple. Let's see. And where is it?
For those of you who are in the audience after these videos, maybe you if you have questions, you're welcome to turn on your video and think about your questions and ask after the videos are done.
Here that I need help. Hopefully this will work.
Yeah, great. Oh, cutie!
Hang on. Why don't I see it? Hang on. Yes, this is little Miles. Hang on, I'll put it full screen.
Oh, that vest!
Chorus of soldiers, townspeople, matadors, elephants, and other miscellaneous opera characters in Cello song.
So the first piece actually was written by a cello teacher who lives in Vancouver, and a lot of his materials are in the early grades up to level 5. I'm hoping to, at least in the new syllabus, include some of his more advanced stuff too.
And what grade is this boy testing for?
Repertoire. So that, yeah. And right, this is the Zoom recital I did in June. And so it's a canned piano part. And he gets off with it in the next piece, but anyway.
at the piano. Wow!
One
Bravo!
more piece.
Super! Wow! Wait, he's prep?
Yeah, yeah. He started a year ago.
Wait, I need to watch a lot more of your teaching. Can I watch your Zoom lessons?
Anyway, here's another one. This is level 1, actually. Yes.
I'm gonna play Family by David and Kathy Blackwell, interpreting this star an American minstrel song arranged by Forrest Kinney.
Wow, super. That's great. So one of the other things that this linguist talks about is having this junk reading around, this comprehensible input, and having. I feel like some of what I do ends up funnel, funneling students. Excuse me. 몰라요. 엄마 이따가 가야 해요. 좀 15분. So, just having more pieces of one level available to them if they want to stay there and just live in that spot for a while, so that they can have that parallel experience instead of constantly learning more and going forward. It's so nice to have that syllabus. The work you've done is really incredible. So thank you.
That's a good use of it, actually, just to for students that need more at that one level.
Well, I wonder if any of you want to come on camera and ask questions. If you want, you could ask them in the chat. That's all I had. Is there anything we're missing, Susan, that you'd like to add?
I'm sure there's stuff I should have said, but I like that there's more modern stuff, and I've got a lot of Canadian stuff in there. I've only got a little American because I couldn't find it. So if anyone knows of some, like especially because the syllabus I think will be redone maybe in a year. I don't know what's happening in terms
Do you know
of
Mike
COVID.
Block's
It seems like it's
contemporary?
totally stopped.
Do you know about Mike Block's contemporary etudes?
No.
Mike Block, he's the one that made the block strap, and he plays with Yo-Yo and the Silk Road Ensemble. He does a lot of jazz and traditional and Arabic music.
How do
but
you spell his last name?
Block, Block.
Okay.
But he has contemporary. There's a lot of like pizzicato and alternative styles and singing while you play, and it depends on how contemporary you really want to get or how folks you want to get. But there's a lot of stuff in there.
I've got Edward Lout, some of his stuff in level 8, and really it's a challenging level 8, but I wanted to put something in there. And
Yeah,
of course we've
great.
got Julio in the syllabus, um, but
Yeah.
other than yeah, and I mean we've got some American folk songs that we arranged, like the Red River Valley or whatever is one, and
I mean, it's nice that even in level one, there's slides and they're on the C string, playing beautifully and deeply on the C string. That's really, it's really, I'm learning so much about this. This is very appreciative that you're willing to give your time like this. Come on and talk to us.
no problem.
Does anyone, any of you out there have any questions? It's so strange that they're all, you can all come on camera. Well, oh, go ahead, Kate.
Hey, hi, Kate. I can't hear.
There we go. How are you?
Good.
I don't know why. Can you see me? I can't see myself for some reason.
Yeah, we can see you just fine.
Okay, sorry, I just came in from a run, so I'm a little disheveled. But Susan, I love your etude books and use them diligently. And my students, they're such a great hit. I think I introduced them last year. And the kids, like every week, I have one student who was a transfer student, and she's struggled with her technique, and she was doing the ABRSM exams when she was living in, I guess, in China or California. I don't know. She's an international child and has lived all over the world. And so she was doing those. And when I got her, her technique was all over the map, but yet she'd done like level 4 exams. And, anyway, long story short, all she wants to do now is play the etudes out of the 5 to 7 etude book. And,
8, that one, but yes.
sorry, the 5 to 8 etude book. I call it the green book and the brown book and the team track. So it's such a big hit, and she's very enthusiastic now to work on her technique and stuff. So that's fun. I was wondering, how do you deal with the sheer amount of scales and technique in just your sort of daily prep? I mean, even level 2 has what, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 scales to deal with just for level 2. And I find like in an hour lesson and everything that we have to cover and preview and work on, I find it difficult to just manage all of that. How do you do that?
Good question. I do, as I said to Andrea earlier, from level 5, the scale challenge is, really it ratcheted up, right? And so from there, I definitely start the scales like in September for June exam, and I just slowly go through them and one at a time, and until like after Christmas, then we're doing all of the harmonics one week and all of then start stepping it up. In the early levels, they're really the scales that I would have them learn anyway. In fact, they're actually probably playing more advanced scales than are on the exams, like in the prep. And but we do introduce the harmonic minor in level 1, just the 1 octave, and then level 2 there's more, but they're let me look up what's exactly on the level 2 again. Do I remember it all?
I think it has the harmonic minor and the melodic minor.
Right, the melodic is tougher, but it's only 1 octave, right?
Yeah.
And it's but you know what, if they don't, I've had transfer students from China who are like playing the Haydn cello concerto and never played a minor scale in their life. And it's so hard to introduce minor scales later in the game. I do think that basically, I think just as in anything that I have them do Suzuki wise, if they can sing it, that's the first step. They've got to understand it. And Yeah, so we have D and G major 2 octaves. I actually teach G major 2 octaves in the middle of book 1. D major not until, middle of book 2 maybe. So, but which is where I would have the kids be doing the level 2 exam. The B flat major I don't normally teach unless they're doing an exam, right? So that is an additional one, and the melodic and harmonic minors. D minor, harmonic, and melodic are 2 octaves in level 2, and the G and C just 1 octave. But D is introduced 1 octave in level 1. So it's, if they've done that, it helps the G and D 1 octave, right? Then they've got at least a start with the minors, and, it's all transferable skills. Yeah, I don't hear everything every week in the lesson. I hear a sample always, and then I assign. So, and some kids are harder to get the scale ideas across than others, for sure. I had one that just did his level 5 exam, and oh man, it was like pulling teeth. And I had to have my husband work with him on scales too while I was examining, because he's a violin and viola teacher, but he was able to work with him on his scales. And it's just, but he's a autistic child, and I have other autistic kids that are really good at the scales. So it's not, not necessarily an autism, it's just the way he learns. And maybe he doesn't like scales. Probably, I'm sure he doesn't like scales. But yeah.
Yeah, I just find in level 2, well, if they're in Suzuki book 2, I've in the past always gone with teaching the melodic minor scales. Has been something. Sometimes my kids do the ASTA exams, American String Teachers exams. We don't really have so much RCM available here. It's not that common. It's possible we're trying them in one area, and then I think they canceled because they didn't have enough. But
I think now you could be actually applying for remote exams and get a cello specialist.
Okay, something like that. I have a couple kids who would probably want to do it because they've done the ASTA exams. I mean, I'm not in love with the ASTA exam, but it's been organizing for my own teaching, which I'm assuming is kind of what you're saying about the RCM, is that it really puts you to creating a well-rounded student. And I have found that as a result of teaching the ASTA exams, which aren't as thorough, but I find them, at least they address posture and position and things of that nature. But then it's a matter of I look at the list, and I've been using the technique book a bit this year with my students, and keeping all of that information in their heads and in my own head for that matter. I didn't grow up doing a lot of the different arpeggios, I would say. That was not in my teacher's curriculum to teach. They just didn't care. I don't know. I thought I studied with good teachers, but no one, said, oh, you have to do these augmented arpeggios. That just wasn't a thing.
No, diminished. We don't have augmented.
Right, but I'm talking Hans Jürgen's book has the augmented and the diminished and the dominant sevens and all of those. And I can't say anyone ever of the teachers that I had said, oh, you should do these. I don't know why. They just said major and minor, and that was that. Maybe I did have bad teachers. But anyway, I tried to be a better teacher to create better students than I was. In going through it all, they get very confused by the way the diminished arpeggios look on the page.
Yeah, no. That's, I tell the students not to look at those.
Right.
In fact, they can't use the music when they're playing them. So I actually tell them that the scale book is for reference, but actually I don't want you to be staring at it all the time. I want you to understand it. And so I make them do things like the diminished sevens, they have to be able to sing them, and they can rename them. You know,
Okay.
so like they can say, for example, they could say the diminished seventh of E starting on D sharp. You know, they can have the D sharp, F sharp, A, B. They could, you know, C, whatever they, if it's a double sharp or double flat, and it's the spelling that has to be correct in the book is often not the easiest. Sorry, I didn't choose a good
No.
one for that,
I would definitely say the kids that I've been sort of putting in that book are in middle school, and I actually want them to look at it because that's the reading challenge they need, is to be able to be presented the confusion of the enharmonics, etc. I need them to understand that, but as a, you know, if I were doing this with
at
it,
least in Canada, it's helpful to remind them that it's just oh Canada, oh Canada, oh Canada. You know, so you can get them. They can sing a diminished seventh. It's easy to play.
So, Garth, do you have a question?
Yeah, I come from this from a different side of this. You know, I'm a fairly new teacher, and I did not grow up with any exams of any kind. So other than maybe like a state solo and ensemble competition, that kind of thing. So if I wanted to learn about, you know, the background, the rationale, and all of that for this system, what would you recommend where I would start reading it, so or that kind of thing?
You should look at the syllabus, which is available on the website, and actually all of the books are available there. But you should start with the syllabus and just see what's there. The scale book is, as Kate said, it goes right. There's one book that goes right from preparatory to level 10, and it does have you know, all your standard fingerings, but it also has from level 7 fingerings that I like, the lower ones that take them up the D string and do an octave in thumb position. And one of the reasons I like that, I was doing them already, but the man that I was working with on the upper end teaches at U of T as well, and he said all the university professors are doing those kind of fingerings now, and so we put those in, but as an option in level, like the second option in level 7 and 8, and I think the first option in 9 and 10. But the reason that I wanted them was sitting in on examiner meetings with the violin examiners, who usually my students were having a violin examiner, which is fine most of the time, but the scales on violin are so much easier than on cello. You know, they just stick their finger down and they go across, and then they can go up. We have to do, you know, when we get to level 5 and we have E major, E minor, we have to do 3 notes, shift 3 notes, shift 3 notes, you know, and really it's so helpful for students' understanding of the geography of their instrument. I make them go through and do, you know, E, F sharp, like just do repeat and slur, saying the names of the notes aloud. So they have to understand, you know, what is the key signature, what are the notes that are changed in the minors, etc., and they have to be able to sing it. And then saying the name of the note they're playing as they go, I find, is a really, really important step. But so what I was starting to say about the violin examiners is they want to hear seamlessness, not just in tune and, you know, with the logical fingering and steady pace. They actually, for getting the highest marks, they don't want to hear the shifts and bow changes, right, in the higher grades. So so having them be able to shift and do a whole octave in thumb position rather than the 1 2 1 2, that's why I like that fingering. A lot of teachers just stick with the standard finger, which is fine. So there are the different options there. But anyway, so you could I would recommend starting with a scale book, and especially the Etude book 5 through 8. I love the prep through 4 is good too, but and just starting with those, and then as you saw with a couple of students that performed, the lower grade, I mean, all of the repertoire books have supplementary material that would be interesting for students, basically, is but I especially really am fond of a lot of the arrangements that our team of composers did in the lower grades stuff. And just including like that spy movie with the gliss back, that's from England, right? That's the Blackwell, Carolyn and David Blackwell piece. So just anyway, variety.
Thanks. So
But
is
go ahead, Garth.
is this something that you have to explain to the, you get a new student and to explain to the parents, or is it enough kind of understood that there's enough of this in the air, so to speak, that it's pretty much understood that there's the exams and all that kind of thing? Or
in Canada, you don't have to explain, but in the States, you may have to. Yeah, maybe you ladies that are there, maybe you could.
Yeah, I think that at least in Michigan, I don't know what it's like in Canada. In Michigan, I would have to go through a great deal of explaining what this process is. And I mean, I don't even know the process, so that tells you something.
Yeah. So, I mean, they have to learn their scales, they have to prepare etudes, and the repertoire. But in addition to that, they do need to practice some actual sight reading. Now, in the Zoom exams, they've been sending the sight reading 24 hours in advance. And actually, they've dumbed it down a bit, which is interesting to me. They've given them 24 hours and made it easier. But I think that must be complaints from the American teachers, because the sight reading was challenging, I will say. And that's why my husband composed those books, because we needed more support. The philosophy for the last 20 years has been, let's stretch their sight reading, but now they're pulling it back a bit, I think. But anyway, that's okay. So, and then the ear, I find Suzuki students have, we've developed great ears in them, but they still have to practice their ear training, because they have to understand what they're hearing. And it's focus as much as anything, right? For those playbacks and the clapbacks are longer. Those are tricky for the kids, especially because it's a focus thing. But and then as the playbacks lengthen and the kids get further away from their experience of learning by ear, it becomes more challenging. That becomes more challenging as well. So you do have to find ways to help them with that. And as I said, anyone that we have materials now there are the online courses that are very piano oriented. They still do help. You could, have students, they can pay $5 a month that they use it. So that you're training there, but it's not like the keys are not the keys that are easiest for us necessarily. They're piano keys for the playbacks and stuff like that. But it's still good for them to have to try and play back something in a harder key for us. Then it's easier when they have the real thing.
yep.
Well, Susan, thank you so much for talking with us. It was so lovely. Thank you. Like, we can just give you a little round of applause there. If any of you want to donate, I'll put a little thing in the chat, Venmo or Andrea Yoon or PayPal, ayoon@umich.edu. It just would be nice to be able to give back to some of these people that have been talking with me. So I'm sure it'll be just small, but Susan, if I can give some to you, I'll funnel some your way. All right, thank you so much.
Thanks, Susan.
Thank you.